What we really need now is a Roscoe, meaning truly radical reforms a la Milei in Argentina. We really need to make a complete turnaround, which would be a historically gigantic effort. And in the course of that, the first thing would be to put the euro to rest.
A warm welcome to our very special interview today. My name is Christian Trinker and I am an expert in gold and silver, as well as their international high security storage with Goldvorsorge, which you can find at goldvorsorge.com. In doing so, I speak with many wealthy individuals every day. And that's why I'm especially pleased that I often hear the name of our guest today. He is repeatedly mentioned and quoted. And my guest today, yes, he is a renowned financial expert, a successful non-fiction author, and in high demand, a person of character who for many years has shaped our understanding with clarity, courage, and expertise. He shapes our understanding of the connections between money, the economy, and politics. In his books, which have achieved bestseller status, he speaks plainly and gives clear answers to questions that others don't dare to address. Welcome, Marc Friedrich. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today to answer questions that concern us all.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for the kind words. Of course, I am very pleased and honored if I can truly provide people with added value. And I'm looking forward to the questions.
Yes, thank you very much. You touch people's hearts, that's for sure. So I'll get started right away. I'm currently in Vienna, but for the past 10 years, I've been working intensively in the German-speaking region. That, of course, includes Germany and Austria and also Switzerland. And my main clients come from these three countries. Now, I'm curious, how do Germans see Austrians?
Well, I can only speak for myself, and I see them very positively. They are brothers in spirit. We share the same values and, in fact, the same traditions. We actually understand each other. As a Swabian myself, I'm even closer to the Austrians. Really, in terms of heart, soul, and temperament. So I always enjoy coming back to Austria. I love going there for vacations, but also for lectures. Most recently, I was in Graz, Salzburg, Innsbruck, and so on. And the people are incredibly warm, even at my events. When Marc invites people, a lot of Austrians come, and I honestly have to say, wow, that's amazing. They come all the way from Carinthia and drive for hours just to see me and take a selfie. Of course, that flatters me immensely. But personally, I have a positive view of Austrians. The government is just as much of a disaster as in Berlin, of course. There's nothing you can do about that, I suppose. But the people are fantastic. And in that regard, you can really go through thick and thin with them.
Yes, that's really, really nice. You could also say in a way that we are somehow a community of fate, right?
Yes, that's actually true. Also, historically speaking, of course, we already share the same language. That's incredibly valuable, I think, and it simply connects us. But of course, also the history as neighbors and so on. And in that respect, yes, especially right now regarding politics, the EU, the euro, etc., and so on. It is a community of fate, but everything will be fine. That's all I can say. In that regard, I am optimistic.
Yes, great. I'm glad to hear that because I just watched one of your latest videos, which really impressed me. And if you're okay with it, I'd like to dive right into the topic. Gladly, of course. That was the video about the debt crisis. And if I may shoot the arrow straight to the heart of the matter, in your opinion, what is the real reason for the debt crisis? In other words, the economic misery we find ourselves in. I know that's I don't know if there's a short answer to that.
Not at all. That's not a difficult question. And of course, there is a short answer. What we're seeing right now, actually on a global scale, is a gigantic case of delaying insolvency because the system is, in fact, bankrupt. We are now living in the final stage of our monetary system because the mountains of debt are higher than ever before, but we still have high interest rates, and yet interest rates already have to be lowered. Why? Because the mountains of debt are no longer sustainable, because the states simply are groaning under the enormous burden of debt that has accumulated over the last 50 years in the debt-based fiat money system. And now we are simply seeing the consequences of historic political misjudgments, both self-inflicted problems and, of course, external problems that are now being brought to us. And all of this combined with the refugee crisis, the war in Ukraine, the coronavirus crisis, and of course the demographic time bomb has actually given us the perfect recipe for the end of our monetary system. And this is playing out right before our eyes. And of course, they're trying to cover it up a bit with debt packages or gigantic budgets to stretch things out like chewing gum. But a look in the rearview mirror of history simply shows, I've just covered this in my latest book here, The Greatest Revolution of All Time, 5,000 Years of Monetary History. You can clearly see money comes and money goes. My grandmother and also my great aunt, by the way, she was also from Bad Ischl. So an Austrian through and through, she always said, money always dies always. So it doesn't matter whether there's an emperor, a dictator, a socialist, or just a democrat in charge. It's always the same game. On average, currencies, well, it's not really real money. I mean, I even have it written here on my t-shirt. Gold is money, everything else is credit. Currencies collapse after about 80 to 100 years. And interestingly, after every collapse, we always start again with a stable monetary system, which has always been backed by gold so far. And we always end up in an inflated, leveraged fiat money system or in the debasement of coins, and so on. And no matter what regime is in power, it's always the same game. The problem, of course, is that 80 to 100 years, almost no one lives that long. And those who are swept into a new system, who are then born into it, naturally forget about it and basically sleepwalk into the next one. Monetary crisis. And it's always the same game. These are cycles that simply repeat themselves. And in a way, we are privileged to experience this live, to witness something so historically significant. On the other hand, of course, we are also the ones who have to bear these collateral damages, who have to deal with them, who lose their prosperity, and who, if they bet on the wrong horse, might even lose their livelihood. And that's really interesting, which is why I'm so passionate about this topic, educating people on how they can protect their money, or rather how they can safeguard their wealth by investing in the right stores of value to get through this time of crisis.
Yes, it's incredible. I agree with you on that. Absolutely, 100%. It's incredible how cleverly this system is constructed, how this financial system is set up, which eventually reforms itself after exponential money printing. But you've already touched on this topic now. If I were to ask you now, what would you change immediately? Because you said lowering interest rates would be one option. What would you change immediately if you could decide to get the cart a little bit out of the ditch? That
is actually a lot of points. I'm actually considering writing a book called Make Europe Great Again or Make Germany Great Again. And for that, you'd really have to adjust a lot of levers. Change them. The fact is, it's no longer enough to just tinker around here and there, to do a bit of cosmetic work, to cover things up somehow. What we really need now is a Roscoe, meaning truly radical reforms a la Milei in Argentina. That means a real 180-degree turn, not a 360-degree turn like Ms. Baerbock wanted, but we actually need to make a U-turn that represents a historically gigantic effort. And in that context, the first thing would be to abolish the euro. The euro is doomed to fail. It will not work. A new monetary system. So the Bitcoiners don't say fix the money, fix the world for nothing. In other words, fix the monetary system and you fix the world. Because that's actually true. Because only in an unbacked paper money system are such brain farts possible, like saying, for example, that you can get some cheap products from China for 2 euros. They then sell them at Hofer, Aldi or Lidl for 2 euros and 20 cents and throw them away the next day. This is only possible because we are essentially borrowing from the future, from the next generation. Or take the endless wars, for example, they can only be financed in this unbacked paper money system. And for that reason, that's where we need to start. That's the biggest lever we have. But of course, if you say the demographic curve could be changed quite easily by simply introducing a kind of tax discount on income. So for the first child, 10%. I actually presented this idea in the video. There was a lot of support for it. For the second child, there's a 20% discount on income. For the third, 30%, and for the fourth, 40%. So that means if you have 4 children, you practically don't pay any income tax from the 4th child onward. It would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. On the one hand, of course, it's an incentive to actually have children. Yes, you also save a lot of money, which you can then reinvest and raise the children well, give them a good education. And on the other hand, it's not unearned income. You actually have to do something for it. So if I just sit on the couch and collect welfare, then there's no 10% discount. Tough luck. So in that respect, you would basically have 2 positive win-win actions for society, for the country. And then, of course, the energy policy would have to be completely changed. So get away from these taboos on thinking, away from the historical wreckage of this energy transition. Trying to manage industrial standard Europe with medieval windmills just isn't going to work. We can already see that now. You simply need baseload capable electricity that you can actually plan with, and not this intermittent electricity that's there one moment and gone the next. So simply put ideology back beneath reason. Reason must take precedence over ideology. Ideologues and socialists should simply be voted out of parliament because it always ends the same way: in inflation, redistribution, welfare dependency, revolution, war, and death. That's just the way it is. History shows us that. And by that, I mean both left-wing and right-wing socialists. It's the same mix and the same bunch. So we should simply start by massively cutting taxes. I would abolish all taxes and say, okay, there will only be one tax left, value-added tax, and you basically pay it every time you shop right at the checkout. I don't need a tax advisor. I don't have to fill out a tax return. It's just one tax. It's easy peasy, and that's that. That means when I pay the tax, I simply do it by paying at the counter. With that, the tax is settled. That's it, period. Then maybe it goes up from 19% in Germany or 20% for you to 25 or 30%, but then that's fine. Then, of course, term limits for politicians. So I think in the coming years, a lot will change, also because of artificial intelligence. With our primate brains, which can only think linearly, we can't even imagine it. This development will proceed exponentially, just like the price of gold.
No, it's incredible. You've really covered a wide range of topics here, and it really is the case that the more people truly engage with these topics, and I'll put it in your words, the better. The more people hear about it and understand it, the more the message spreads. Normality, though the word is a bit misused, real normality returns to life. So without digressing from the question, but I want to come back to this great idea about reducing taxes the more children you have. I just can't get it out of my head. I'm a bit older than you, but not by much. I'm in my mid-50s now. You're still younger. But I grew up on a mountain farm in Styria. At times, we had 4 generations living under one roof. And I wonder, of course, a lot has improved, but back then, there were also other values that really mattered, values that have been lost today. Nowadays, I see situations where people just think about how to send their elders off to nursing homes. It's terrible, the whole thing. So what happened? You've experienced this too. Why has it come to this?
Well, again, it's actually the monetary system, because the pace has simply increased, because the stress and pressure are higher, and also the need to go to work, because back then, 40 years ago or 30 years ago, it was even enough if just one family member had a steady job. Back then, you could easily support a family of 4, build a house, and even go on vacation twice a year. Nowadays, that's no longer possible. Now, both parents have to work, and they're no longer called parents but a married couple, because they can't afford children and still only manage to rent, and they can't save anything. And they're still threatened by old age poverty. And of course, you neither have the leisure nor the time to somehow take care of grandma, or there's simply no space. In the past, almost everyone had a house and a garden, were self-sufficient, and even grew a few potatoes. But where is grandma supposed to live? In the basement downstairs or in the pantry? So no one has the headspace for that, no one has the time for that. The values have been lost. So this civilization that we are so happy about and so proud of, on the one hand, of course, it's much more convenient, much more modern, great, 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 yes. But is there more meaning in it? Actually, it has completely developed away from humanity in the opposite direction. We no longer live together, we don't just live alongside each other, but worse, we actually live against each other. So it's only black or white now. Are you a Rapid fan or you know it? Or are you an Austria fan? Are you vaccinated or unvaccinated for the war or against the war? The world is upside down. And that's exactly the paradigm shift I'm describing, that in the past it was a good thing to be for peace. Now, in the meantime, you're seen as the villain, a Putin sympathizer, or even basically a Nazi if you're for peace, that is, against violence, a pacifist. And the Greens, for example, I don't know how it is in Austria, but here in Germany, the Greens were founded out of the peace movement. There were human chains against war, against nuclear weapons, and so on, etc. And I grew up during that particular time as well. And then suddenly, it's not like I've personally changed in any significant way. Suddenly, the Greens are the very ones who possess knowledge of every single type of weapon and are actively working towards the front lines of conflict and basically want war. So that already shows that the world has been completely turned upside down, that we're experiencing a new era. This turning point is in full swing because many people say, I just don't understand it anymore. Yes, but that's how it is. And unfortunately, our current system is also partly to blame for that because we've put humanity aside. It's about ideologies. It's about trench warfare. There's no sense of togetherness anymore. And of course, there's no room for grandma or even your own parents in that. It's more convenient to just push them aside and say, what I don't see is fine, and so on. Ostrich method. But we need to come together again. We need to build bridges. I mean, at some point, we also have to work or live with Russia again. They live on the same continent as we do. The same goes for Israel or Palestine. At some point, we have to live together again with those who might have an opposing opinion to mine. Those are neighbors, friends, acquaintances, colleagues. Well, I never understood that. I grew up in a time when it was always important to uphold discourse in a pluralistic democracy. Different opinions, not just here to listen to them, but also to endure, accept, and respect them. But that doesn't mean you should stigmatize someone and say, just because you're a fan of Bayern Munich and I'm a fan of VfB, that you're a bad person. But in the meantime, if you have a different opinion that goes against the narrative, you get excluded and stigmatized. And yes, even discredited. Then you're immediately put into a box, usually with ad hominem attacks. That means people don't even address your arguments anymore because they have such a clear worldview and just elevate themselves above others and say no because he was, for example, against the COVID measures, which, as we all know in hindsight, were the biggest nonsense ever, completely wrong. Are you now a bad person? I don't want to be friends with you anymore. I don't want to give you any more jobs. I don't want to go to the sports club with you anymore, etc. And it already shows where things are heading. For me, that's divide and conquer. That was done deliberately to separate people because, of course, a people who band together, a people who are enlightened, of course, that's always more dangerous than when you divide people, split them up, and then feed them misinformation. That worked brilliantly because from this fragmented bunch, you can't expect a revolution or anything like that, since they're all preoccupied with themselves. And of course, as I said, that's also due to the fact that this system is no longer humane. And that's where we need to go. And people are thirsty for it. Yes, for that. They want to be part of a community again. They want to meet up with others again. I mean, during Corona, there were Monday walks. There were reading circles. People need that. We are social animals. We can't just sit alone in front of the computer all the time or just watch TV. We need togetherness. None of us, no matter how intelligent or how rich, can live alone. Götz Werner, the founder of DM Drugstores, with whom I also wrote a book, always said that we all stand on the shoulders of others. Because we need the cashier, we need the mailman, the baker, we need the midwife, we need the chimney sweep, we need the engineer, but we also need the teacher. And that's exactly how it is, because none of us is a jack of all trades. The only ones who claim to be jack of all trades are the politicians. And we've seen for over 2 decades now that they can't do it.
Yes, it's unbelievable. You're already voicing the thoughts and questions I have because it really is. It's unbelievable. I lived in the USA for several years. And even back then, it was already either Democrat or Republican and either left or right. And that's exactly how it has continued here with us. As you said, it's no longer this pluralism with different viewpoints, but instead you're immediately labeled as left or right. Then people are put into boxes. And that's definitely intentional, just as you said. It's done deliberately because I believe that at their core, people are much better, much kinder, and much more inclined toward harmony than what is being portrayed to us from above, so to speak.
May I just jump in for a moment and say something? By the way, I also have a YouTube channel. Feel free to check it out. And I end every video there, ever since the very first one, with a sentence, "The world out there is better than we always think." And more people are confirming that to me. And when you travel, when you're on the road, when you talk to people, whether it's in Linz or at Lake Starnberg, in Landshut or Helsinki on the Faroe Islands or in New Zealand, people are, I would say, 95% good. They live out compassion, civil courage, and a sense of community. And I have had incredibly valuable, beautiful, profound, and magical encounters with people of all different religions, backgrounds, skin colors, sexualities, whatever it may be. That's why I always say this. So anyone who says something like this or that person is stupid, or they are, and that group of people, well, to me, that's just a mentally limited person. Really, because there are good Austrians and shitty Austrians. You know that just as well as I do, and it's the same with the Germans. Period. That's it. It doesn't matter where you come from, what color your skin is, or what gender you are. What matters is always, what is your true nature? What is your character? What is your heart like? And that's why I also say, go out there. Just travel, talk to people. Most people are positive, and often it's like this. I recently spoke with a lady whom I always found rather unlikable based on her demeanor. Again and again, I thought she was arrogant. This and that. Prejudices that played out in my head. And at some point, I was so convinced, yeah, she's just a stupid cow. Simply put, I didn't want anything to do with her. Well, not at all. In our very first conversation, all my prejudices were shattered. She was incredibly warm-hearted. And now we're friends. So I was standing in my own way, almost ruining a wonderful, amazing friendship for myself. just because I had this movie playing in my head. So get over yourselves. And no matter if someone is wearing ugly shoes or has weird headphones or drives a stupid car or whatever, it's all just prejudice. Really look at the person. What is their soul? What is their heart? And then make your judgment. That's why I always say at the end of every video, the world is better than we think. But you also have to give people a chance and actually talk to them.
Yes, that's true. I absolutely agree with you on that. And there's an important aspect which brings me to the key word I want to talk about now, emigrating. Because I know a lot of people who have emigrated for one reason or another. Maybe their pension here is no longer enough. They can't get by on their pension, on the little money they have. Or maybe they just want to fulfill their dream somewhere else. There are people who have the courage to do it, and there are many of them. And even when I hold a webinar, I can see on the map that people are logged in from all sorts of countries, from every time zone. Now, this is a difficult question because it's a double-edged sword. I believe the world out there is much better and much more beautiful than it's often portrayed to us, just as before. But what would you say to young people today? Would you recommend that they emigrate? Or would you rather say, stay here with enthusiasm and let's build a better future together?
Tendentially, of course, the latter, because every time you leave a country, you automatically weaken yourself at first and actually face difficult starting conditions elsewhere. On the other hand, I also say young people travel. After graduating from high school, I also traveled around the world for a while, and it had an incredible impact on me. I would say that in that half year, I learned more from traveling than in 13 years of school, actually. So life is the best teacher. That's why I would always say, after school, after your training, after university, pack your bags, travel the world, get to know the people, the countries, the traditions, the cultures, the cuisines, everything. Soak it all in. And then maybe you'll come back home. Of course, sometimes you end up staying away and find a new home somewhere else. But on the other hand, you might also come back. I came back too, even though I thought I would never return to that old stuffiness, to my Swabian Pustekuchen homeland. It really is something special. You have a connection to it, you can't deny that. And you only start to notice it at a certain age, of course. But you always have to think about it or talk to young people. What is the intention? Why do they want to emigrate? Of course, things look pretty bad in Germany right now, but let's be honest. In 1944, things looked even worse. And yet children were born, businesses were opened, and people still stayed here, and so on. And I think in the end, looking back, you can proudly and rightfully say it wasn't the worst idea, because like a phoenix rising from the ashes, Europe climbed the ladder of prosperity like never before in human history. A truly unique civilizational achievement. And it's a privilege that we are now able to live in this prosperity.
Yes, I completely agree with you. Now, just a small what-if question. Where would Marc Friedrich emigrate to if he planned to do so?
Yes, if I were out and about in a jolly manner, I would say so. Melmark, that's where Alfred comes in. No, all joking aside.
It's quite a distance away, isn't it?
Yeah, I have no idea how far away it is, but it would be funny. Well, I feel very close to the Irish and the British. I like their sense of humor, and I find the landscape beautiful. I also like the Greek islands, Greece in general, but of course also Argentina. So I have lived in South America, and I feel close to it as well. So in that regard, those would be the 3 destinations I could see for myself. It just depends on what's important to me at that moment. Is it the culture, the landscape, or is it more about the warm weather? Or am I simply afraid of a war, or that Europe might collapse, revolution, and so on? Or maybe the Russians will be at the door tomorrow. But I could imagine staying there, living there for a while. I haven't seen New Zealand yet, but every time I see pictures of it, I think, wow, that's really stunning. But for me, it's just in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, so New Zealand, if you really like New Zealand, I would have thought maybe you'd say Austria for emigrating.
Yeah, Austria. I wouldn't have a problem with that. I have many clients who have actually emigrated to Austria or moved there. Monica Gruber has also moved to Austria now. Yeah, she's great. Yeah, exactly. So I get that too. Let me tell you one thing. You almost had a vaccine mandate too, but if there had been a mandate and so on, then, yeah, if there were a different government, or rather the Austrians are really only 1 or 2 years behind us politically. They're just as dumb. Right. I still have hope because the Austrians, they still know what they want, what they don't want, and they speak up about it. That's just not the case in Germany anymore. Almost 70% of people here no longer dare to say what they think because it's such an overbearing system. Here, there are even house searches because of a tweet or something like that. which is absurd, or when politicians are called idiots or something, which has actually turned out to be true, but even with a satirical undertone, you end up getting a visit from the authorities, and that's an authoritarian development that isn't good. And I think if the wrong people come to power, even in Vienna, things could go in that direction there too. And no one is immune to that. Right now, because we're living in such an idiotic time.
Yes, that's really the case, and that's also the problem. So you can't just blame it on negativity or people's moods alone, because that's actually a symptom of something bigger. But still, if I just think about it, Germany used to be the #1 economy, or at least #2 in the world. Now we can almost be satisfied if we're number 30 or something like that. I don't know. That's just a shot in the dark, but all you hear is negativity. What happened to people? What would you say to all these people to help them feel more motivated again? The problems aren't going to be solved right away. But what kind of courage for life could you give them?
That's difficult. We've become a bit spoiled by prosperity when you're simply saturated, meaning completely full, and have given up all your autonomy. Back then, it was to Chancellor Merkel, who wasn't called Mutti for nothing, and then you have this kind of guardian state that takes care of everything. And you don't even think for yourself anymore, because as a sovereign citizen, you've effectively handed over your autonomy to politics. And politics has taken a liking to accumulating more and more power and deciding which way things should go. In the meantime, politicians even wanted to dictate how we should heat our homes, and who is good, who is evil, maybe even which war comes next. And that's what's coming next. And that's always a warning sign for democracy. That's the situation we're in right now. But these are also cycles. In my book, I describe the 5 most important cycles that are now unfolding right before us. And if you understand these cycles, then you know why politics acts the way it does, why we are currently in this situation, and of course, how we can get out of it. And I would simply say, folks, we should actually be grateful. I always say each of us is a winner. So you, me, all of us. Why? Because we all prevailed against 100, 200 million sperm. We were the fastest. So that was actually our first victory, because if the sperm behind you had won, then maybe there would be a beautiful woman sitting here now, or a tall man, or a short man. I don't know really. So in that sense, we actually came into this world as winners. And if you just think about how unlikely it is that we're sitting here right now, that your parents and grandparents found each other and passed on their genes in such a way that we're here now, it really makes your head spin a bit and feel a little crazy. Really, because we're actually so small and there are so many coincidences, or maybe even fate itself. Moments that allow us to even be sitting here at all. And now we even get to communicate here. Vienna, Schorndorf, we're connected via the internet. We have a level of prosperity like never before. We can park rockets backwards. We have fax machines, telephones, everything in one, banking, etc. It's truly an incredibly privileged way we live. When we get home, we just turn on the heater and it gets warm. When I think about it, my grandmother lived in the Bavarian forest. Until she was 90, she still had to stoke the fire and chop wood. And it was only a wood stove. That was really hard work, though it had its advantages, of course. You were self-sufficient, no one could fool you, and so on. When we think about it, just 1 or 2 generations before us, how hard life was, and now we can just say on the weekend, oh, I feel like flying to Venice. Then you book a flight if you can afford it. And in the afternoon, you're sitting in Venice, and you can just sit there and drink espresso. You just have to say, be grateful every day and say, thank you for letting me live. Especially in this time, the privilege of being born late. And my Jewish friends have a beautiful prayer. When they wake up in the morning, they always give thanks that they have escaped the little death, sleep, and that they are able to wake up healthy and empowered. I think that's wonderful. Beautiful, yes, just this sense of gratitude and humility. And that's something we completely lack. Somehow we take everything for granted and constantly find fault with everything. That's why Germans are always in such a bad mood. I see it here again and again too. There you have these made-up, attractive women with expensive perfumes sitting in their Cayennes at a red light, pulling a face as if the world were about to end. Every time I think, people go to Africa, go to Bolivia, go to Sri Lanka, go to India, then maybe you'll hopefully become a bit more humble again. And that would do us all good. It would also bring humanity back into our society.
Yes, and to that I say thank you very much. That's the message. I'll try to pass it on as well, because today we all live the way only a king used to live there. So in that sense, yes. So if you compare it like that, especially here in Vienna, we have that. I mean, I also lived in the USA for a long time. There you actually can't drink the tap water.
No.
Here in Vienna, it's basically like mineral water. It comes from the mountains and that's where it starts, yeah. What, you can drink the water? What, you can drink the water from, and things like that you really have to appreciate. But now, nevertheless, the situation is that, of course, I mainly deal with clients who have, let's say, accumulated their life savings, a fortune, whether they've inherited it or worked for it. Most of them have worked hard and already paid so many taxes, but now they're worried about it. And now let me just jump to a slightly different and quite interesting topic. A lot of people keep asking me about Bitcoin, yeah? Because some of them have actually made a lot of money with Bitcoin, or they're hesitant to get involved. And of course, they're feeling uncertain. And then, of course, I'm the bad guy because I have some doubts about the origins of Bitcoin. There are these patents from the NSA, from the intelligence agencies, who have patented certain 2.56 algorithms. And I believe that Bitcoin is definitely something where you can make a lot of money in the short term. But now I come to the question, do you think that Bitcoin and the others, all the cryptocurrencies, can also be a long-term investment strategy?
Of course, nothing is set in stone. We just mentioned the NSA's patent for encryption cryptography, chart 256. Yes, the NSA actually had that patented. If the American government were ever to come out and say, okay, now we've emptied it or we're plundering it or whatever, life insurance companies are required to invest in government bonds. That means you're investing in debt. They then, of course, have a huge gap in their retirement provision and have to figure out how to fill it.